Hi everyone. What follows is a collaboration with TERRA Black in which she interviewed me to discuss how the language of astrology interfaces with the world of wisdom on the body, mind, and spirit levels. She asks me about how I initially connected to astrology and how I learned to connect the wisdom of the planets to the practical realities of life. TERRA, through her YouTube channel named Janteur, is presenting ideas and practices toward uniting soul wisdom with embodied well-being. She has awakened to her life purpose being to help others awaken their intuition, experience discovery of true self, and expand life through spiritually guided and holistic healing and well-being. The link to her YouTube channel is in the description of this video, see below. She would love it if you subscribed to her channel to help her fulfill her life mission. Thank you for watching.
Welcome everyone to the Janteur podcast. First, let me apologize for my technical difficulties. We tried to do this live, but we're going to record on Zoom now, and hopefully you will enjoy the conversation that Andre and I bring to you. And I'm so delighted to have Andre as a special guest today. Andre is the founder of Proactive Astrology. He is a professional astrologer, a teacher, and a guide who helps people navigate their lives with clarity through the wisdom of the stars. And our theme today is practical astrology, soul wisdom for everyday alignment. Astrology can sometimes feel distant or abstract, but today our goal in this conversation is to bring it down to earth. So we'll explore how astrology can help us make decisions, understand cycles, and feel more deeply connected to the wisdom of our own soul. So, Andre, thank you so much for being with me and bearing with me. May we start with you sharing how you first found astrology or how astrology found you? And I think you've been doing this for 45 years now, nearly?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for having me on. I appreciate it. And you put it very well. Your description is perfect. I have been doing it a long time, and that is, in fact, probably, I would say, the key way that I use astrology is to bring it down to earth, because otherwise, it can still be really interesting to speculate and to get into all kinds of, visionary perspectives. But to my understanding, the most important aspect of astrology is how can we use what is happening in the sky as it relates to our individual charts to make decisions, to connect with all kinds of things. Because the most important thing is what it does is it makes you aware that you are in cycles that are inescapable. The cycles are there. There's no way to get out of them. What you don't know is how you'll react to the cycles, how you'll use the cycles. And so then you can do it better, or you can do it less well, and you can do it very poorly. Like what happens with a lot of these political figures. They just make huge mistakes because they don't know the cycles that they're in. And so then they walk themselves into a whole lot of trouble. So that's a short way of, short version explaining how astrology works.
And how did you find astrology? Like, was it something you were always interested in, or?
No, I was not. There were no mystical, astrological connections in my family. I would credit, well, not the day exactly, but the year that I learned to sit still and meditate, which basically amounts to being with myself in my own mind, which then leads you into what people call just being, as opposed to becoming or thinking or being elsewhere. There's a present moment energy, being with oneself. And even though I didn't go into it because I would be going into astrology or anything else for that matter, astrology was one of the results, which came around 6 months to a year from the beginning. of my, meditation interest, but especially practice. The whole key was that I was showing up day after day after day, not spending a lot of time, 20 minutes, sometimes 40 minutes, sometimes. And that seemed to do it because I noticed 6 months later, I became more aware of my own body energy, how to eat better, manage my energy better. And I had this interest in looking into astrology and planets, probably if I had to guess, because in that meditation space, there's a sense of expanded energy and expanded feeling. And it's not a big reach to then realize, well, I'm in this enormous universe, and maybe there are forces that are much bigger than me, which of course there are. And the planets seem to be, the planets, the solar system, what astrology does, felt very interesting. And so then I had enough initiative to learn how to draw charts, because in those days, computers were just beginning to come online. And so I did have the experience of the earliest computers drawing charts, which was very rudimentary, and using a cassette and then producing a very limited output. But I learned even prior to that how to do it myself using basic, I would say, high school math, ratios, like looking into columns and calculating things. And so then I got into it. And now here's where you can start speculating, people that say, maybe you did this in a past lifetime, or you had something in your genetics that was latent, that was about to emerge, because it did come really easy to me in the sense that I could see the rules pretty quickly, because it's really nothing other than, again, basic high school geometry, measuring, counting. And then the breakthrough came pretty quickly where I looked back. I could see the cycles from years prior to when I had even no connection to astrology, and I saw two or three things that just stunned me. Where I knew the meaning of the planet, and I thought, wow, that's amazing that just then this thing was happening, reflecting the situation, unbeknownst to me, because no one was speaking to me then, saying, look, you've got your Pluto or your Saturn or whatever. And so then that really encouraged me to keep digging and looking and tracking, which is what I then did. And it took quite a while. At every stage I thought I was really good, and I wasn't. And even now I tell myself, no, you're not really that good. Keep working at this, because there's always something else, something new, some distinction, something that comes in that teaches you what is really going on. But it's an amazing language toward, self-awareness, self-knowledge, self-understanding, and of the world too, because you see these patterns in your own chart, and you see them in the world. You see them in the way people behave out there, whether they know it or not, when their cycles are affecting them in a certain way. Yeah.
Yeah. And thank you for sharing that. You hit on two things that I think are important, and we'll get to later in the questions. But the fact that of the oneness of everything being connected, and then which leads perfectly into holistic, right? It's not just one piece here and then everything else. It's all connected. Things should be looked at holistically, and I think that's important for life in general. And that's what I focus on in my practice, is holistic well-being. So thank you very much for sharing that. When we typically think about, myself included, when a lot of people think about astrology, we often think of, a horoscope or your sun sign, and that's pretty much it. How do you define practical astrology, and what sets it apart from those surface level ideas?
Well, the first thing would be, astrology is the whole chart. You've got not just the sun sign. That's what a lot of people focus on. Aries, Taurus, Gemini. Maybe they go a little further and they say I have the moon somewhere, or even if they say two or three things, that's still not it. You need the whole thing, because here's an example. Say you're whatever, some sign, and you happen to have a major planet like Saturn, Jupiter, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, making a connection to that sun sign. Well, that changes the whole thing, because that planet will color your way of being in a major way. And so you need to know that. So in essence, you need to know the full chart. And then the practicality is that you learn to see the patterns and how you can then be in the world, which could be related to relationships, financial, health matters, spiritual, all of these things are constantly in play around the cycles. It's like that. So you, instead of just keeping it as a, visionary language where you can say amazing things, you say, no, well, what can I do? How can I use this to bring it into my life? Now, sometimes it's just that you'll be in a cycle. I just went through this, I've been at this 45 years, and I went through this roughly 2-week period when it was really, really hard. And I was doing everything I could. And at one point I thought, okay, now I'm just going to take my own advice that I often say to people, look, when all else fails, wait it out, because it's going to change. And I remember when I first got into this, up to about 10, 15 years, I couldn't really trust it. I would be in a major jam and I would think, oh, how can this be? There's no way out of this. This is just a disaster. Especially, for example, I was really into sports, injuries. Well, sure enough, I would wait, and whatever it was, 6 weeks later, 2 months later, the energy would change. And so I slowly but surely began to realize, yes, these cycles are very real. And so then I aligned myself with that. In the near term here, what I'm describing, it was a much shorter period, but it didn't feel any less threatening, painful. It's hard when you're disconcerted, maybe not feeling so well. But sure enough, it changed. So I see that as practical because no matter how I'm feeling, I have enough, presence of mind to remain calm and wait it out, which is really important. Otherwise, one panics and makes bad decisions, as a result, right? So the long and the short of it is knowing your cycles, like where are you in? What are your cycles right now? It's critical because they can both help you to settle yourself and provide strategies for how to, deal with things. That's the practicality of it in a nutshell.
No, that makes so much sense. And I feel like as you were speaking, I was seeing myself in those same phases where it's like things are going fine. And then next thing you know, it's like, wait, what's going on here? Like, this isn't okay. And interestingly enough, I was meditating the other day and I asked my guides, I talked to my guides, and I'm like, what is the next best step? And they said, sit tight. And I'm like, but I don't want to sit tight. Like, I want to do something. I want some action, some confirmation of something, but I just had to release it. And like you say, sit tight. And already, like literally an hour or so later, I felt the energy shift. And like you can tell, like, okay. So sometimes even if you don't want to do that, sitting tight and being in presence is the best thing to do, is the most practical
Yeah,
thing to do.
exactly. Which, by the way, is itself mirrored in the astrology, because the planets themselves, if you study it enough, they encourage you to meditate. They encourage you to connect to your being, and then you express all these archetypes better as a result. So in a way, your guides were saying to you, just hang in there, be yourself, which, you're doing nothing for a period. It appears like you're doing nothing. But maybe nothing is the best solution because, scientists say, when they're asked, how did the universe start? You know what the answer is? It started from nothing.
Nothing.
So it may be that, nothing to us, because
Right.
that's how we look at it, because we're something in quotes. But, if you hear their explanations, it sounds like there's this source energy that is completely invisible. Somehow but it's undergirding everything, like all the matter in the universe, all the planets and stars, and there's a lot of it, is less than 5% of the universe. 95+% is this mysterious thing they call it dark energy, dark matter. They don't know what the heck it is. They just know that no one can see it,
Yeah.
but it's controlling everything. So if that's true for everything, this is part of the logic of when you meditate, you realize if something is affecting everything, it must be affecting me because I'm in everything. I'm here. Everyone
Yes.
is. Like, where else could you be? So there's the logic in a nutshell again. But there I'm going a little bit more into the mystical realm in a way. The astrology, in a sense, brings it back down to earth, because then, okay, you say this, you say that, then you have to deal with your Saturn cycle or whatever you're in, to navigate through, which could mean like you got to do your taxes or, some kind of thing that you think, okay, well, that's not a whole lot of fun, but okay, I got to do it, so I'll get to work on that.
Yeah. Well, and you were talking about going into the mystical, which I actually love, but another way I think to help bring it back down to earth is what I learned years ago is that when we're asking the universe or whomever for something, the universe moves people, places, and things to bring us what we are asking for if it's in our highest and best good. So if I ask for something and it's not showing up right away, it doesn't mean that it's not coming, but they have to move the people, places, and things behind the scenes to be able to give me what I want. And then that's when it shows up, and you're like, oh, I asked about that 2 months ago, or whatever the case. But like you say, even though it may seem like nothing is happening, things are happening below the surface that we don't know about.
Very true. Yeah, that's 100% true. That verifies the power of prayer, because prayer is an intention where, here's what I want to bring into my life. Or when people do visualizations, or it's all intentioning,
Mhm.
and it tends to help a lot what you said about saying, let this be true, or let this happen, if it's if it's if it's a good thing.
Yeah.
Don't and you almost, it's best to pray, don't do things too much for my ego. If anything, keep my ego in check, because that's not a good trip. As soon as you do that, you get bad behavior, and you get behavior that is actually working against you, working against your best interests. And so that's an important, prefacing of the wish to keep in mind, which is what amounts to how people say we should live a life of service, of channeling that energy in the best
Yeah.
possible way to both help ourselves feel calm and peaceful and fulfilled and happy, and then hopefully help other people as well, rather than, I'm going to be like this, shining object, and that people will find attractive and worship in some case. I mean, this is just total silliness and dangerous, even in my opinion.
Yeah. No, and it's so interesting how so many people don't understand one of the fastest ways to feel good or find some type of joy and pleasure is to do something for somebody else, is to be of service. And the feel when it's genuine, obviously, the feeling that you get, the joy that you get from that is like immeasurable. And again, one of the fastest ways to uplift yourself or somebody else. And so I think and I'm happy that you said that, because that is important. And I don't think uh, many people focus on it so fast. They want that instant gratification for something for them, but it's like give, and that's how you receive. And you can give what in a way that feels good to you so that it's still meaningful and purposeful, but then you get back tenfold whatever it is that you're giving out.
Very
But
true. Very, very
yeah.
true. 100%. Yes. Yes.
So can you give us grounded grounded examples of how astrology can be applied to someone's daily life? So I have three examples here. Making a big life decision, to help navigate a challenge we may feel stuck in, and to help us find alignment. So we'll start with using astrology to make a big life decision. How do we do that in a grounded way?
Well, it's again, awareness of what cycle are you in? What's the nature of the situation? So the astrologer, him or herself, will know that, and so then they behave accordingly. They know, okay, I got this thing, and then they might do something like this. Well, there's a lot of Saturn now, or there's a lot of whatever it is. For instance, Neptune can be a confusing energy, but when it kind of shifts, you're looking for the points where there's some clarity that can emerge. So if it has to be like, I got to totally decide, you try to strategize, to find the point that feels best. Just like you might, for example, if someone is doing a surgery or some intervention, you stay out of certain things, certain angles that may not be all that helpful. Like, for instance, Saturn in challenging aspects is not a great time to do, go to the dentist and do dental surgery. I learned that the hard way when I had it back like around 10 years into it, and I chose the total opposite of what I should have done. And sure enough, I really, it was fine in the end, but it was way longer than it needed to be. And so it's just that, it's where are you, and what choice can you make around that, so you pick the spot. At the same time, just knowing the totality of the situation you're in will give you a sense of, for example, am I in a period that is more important, more serious, more demanding of me? And people feel this, by the way, irrespective of astrology. They don't disagree with you if you say, hey, you've got a period where, for example, Saturn is going through your sun sign. This was there was an astrologer in the 20th century named Grant Loy. The way he coined it was, when Saturn goes over your sun, the chickens of ambition come home to roost. But this means a person gets more serious, more focused. I'm going to do this thing that is going to be important for me, that'll probably last many years. Each person does different things with that. For one person, it can be going back to school, it can be a business, it can be just purely learning more about themselves and improving their own disciplines and things like that. Or it can be more than one thing, right? But you know what the feeling of the planet is when you're tracking it. It's unmistakable. And so you're bringing these mystical patterns down to earth, down to your, body, mind. Here I am, and I'm dealing with this. I'm not in, even though I might be able to know there's this big universe, and in a sense, I'm everywhere all at once, but I'm also here,
Yeah.
on the spot in a very limited way. I mean, that's the challenge of life, that we can have incredibly big thoughts, big perceptions, but in the end, it's a very, very tiny speck, of something channeling all of that. Yeah.
Okay. So I have a feeling the answer will be similar, but you can clarify. How do we use astrology or apply astrology to help us navigate a challenge we may feel stuck in?
Well, in part, what I said earlier, if all else fails, you wait it out, to get perspective, although you may still have to make a decision. So there's that. It's that sense that, okay, I'm in this thing. What do the planets say? What is my best move? Now, here's the thing. Going back to what you said, one of the things that is very important that involves you yourself in the most basic way, and in a sense for me ties my own life experience together, is that if you need to make a big decision, if you need to do something important, be with yourself regularly in your quiet space. I always say to people a minimum of 10 minutes a day, but honestly, the longer, the better. But here's the thing, right? If you use, like, I'll give you an example with Saturn, right? Saturn can often be the most challenging. You decide, okay, that sounds like a good idea. I'm going to do that. That is Saturn's nature, to hold you to it. It's like an accountability planet that says, just show up and do it, show up and do it. When you do, you almost always will end up doing more because you'll see the benefit of it. Within a few days or a few weeks, you'll notice, yeah, this is working pretty well. And you may even start to enjoy it, right? In that quiet place, that still mind, which is present moment focus in a relaxed way, is where you can hear your guides. It's plain and simple. That's it, but it's, in a way, it drives people crazy because it's too simple. They say, well, how can that be? Well, I don't know what to tell you. Try it and you'll see. I think,
No, even they say sometimes the simplest answer is the right answer, but it doesn't track, because I think we make things so hard ourselves. We feel like it has to be this grind or this grudge, or we have to work so hard to make it meaningful, when
right.
that's not always the case, especially when we're coming home to self. So
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
and then again, this is along the same lines, but you can clarify, how do we use astrology to help us find alignment?
Alignment. It's the same thing. That is essentially the same. Now, here's the thing, though. It is that polarity, or those two poles, because if you just use astrology, meaning you're learning about the meaning of planets and so forth, and you don't ground it in your body mind balance in some way, then it might help you, but your energy is still going to be a bit too jagged and too out of sorts and not centered and calm enough to take advantage. That's the one distinction, because otherwise it may appear that all you have to do is just flood the zone with more and more astrology information, track everything, and really, to be honest, I mean, I go on these jaunts because I teach and so forth. I'll spend 2 hours, 3 hours just crunching numbers and looking at planets. That's not really fulfilling in the end. After a little while, you just got to stop, let go, drop it all, and find your calm energy. So those two things work together. It's really good knowledge. Of course, it's great to know. Then, in a way, it's very ironic, because in a way, in order to really assimilate the knowledge really well and use it, you have to go to a kind of place where you are completely, it's almost like divine ignorance. Okay, I know all that, and I'm just going to drop it. I'm going to know nothing now. I'm just going to know nothing, and then it kind of settles, and it's where you get that guidance, intuition, or guides that say, "Aha, go this way." It's so obvious, and so you go, and then you're fine, right? You've made the right choice, where both things are working together at the same time, right? So, I mean, to be honest, I have to be, I'm totally biased because I'm an astrologer. I use it all the time. I think it's really important to know the cycles. But if I had to say to a person, okay, well, you have to choose, you can't do both, well, then just be still, forget about astrology, don't bother. Be still, show up for yourself every day in your body and mind, and it'll come to you. Because when you're doing that, you will do what is natural for your own chart in the best possible way with your cycles. Lots and lots of people out in the world will never see a chart who are innately wise. And it's because
Mhm.
they're either this way by nature or they really work at it through this kind of, ability to be still with themselves for periods. That's the
I love
logic.
that so much. Like that to me was a mic drop moment. I love that so much because
Well,
no matter what you know on the external, it's all about going inside. And if you be still and go inside, you will know every single thing that you need to know for yourself.
correct.
I love that so
100%.
much. But we're
100%.
talking about astrology here. So,
Yeah, that's right.
and you just mentioned cycles. So obviously, astrology is deeply tied to cycles, both cosmic, as the whole universe, multiverse, and then personally. So for someone new to astrology, what cycles are the most helpful to start observing?
Uh, I would probably, I would say the Saturn cycle. Like if a person really wants to reduce everything to the minimum, because this is the thing when you're learning about a new language, it's like one word at a time, one sentence at a time. You chunk it, and then it starts to grow and become a whole after a period of time. So you add more factors. But if you look at a person's sun sign and you study where Saturn is and where Saturn was, you get a lot of information on that alone, right? But that already is a bit beyond most people's interest or capacity, whatever. They're not going to go that far to look into it. So I mean, then you probably have to consult with an astrologer at least to kind of get yourself going. This is the thing too. By the way, we live in an era where there is so much available information. When I got into this, there was almost nothing. You had to go to the occult shop in the back. There was some little book, and you had to decipher all the stuff. Now, I mean, there is so much you can use websites without even buying an astrology program, which is so helpful, to have. But you can find a lot of totally free information that you can you can learn about, you can track, and so forth. And so, yeah, that's the answer to that one.
So Saturns, begin with Saturn.
Yeah, Saturn. Yeah,
So the age of Aquarius is a cycle, correct?
it is. Although the age of Aquarius is one of those things that probably emerges from the constellational view of the sky, where there's this idea that astrology only works when you tie it to the constellations. I completely disagree with that. And my experience, not just my ideas, my experience has verified it for me way more than once, repeatedly, in fact. So, by that logic, those constellations aren't even aligned anymore. The idea that, oh, the Virgo
Yeah.
thing and the Libra thing.
Yeah.
Astrology, the tropical astrology is earth based. It's interesting that you say about grounding it, right? So, it's earth based, and therefore, zero Aries is always, uh, you know, the spring point, and you're always an Aries then, no matter what the constellations are
Mm,
doing it. So
okay.
the age of Aquarius has this feeling of Aquarius being some new breakthrough, where people become, uh, like, how would you put it? If someone asked you about what the age of Aquarius is supposed to be, what do people think it is, or what do they expect it to accomplish when we reach the age of Aquarius?
From my perspective, and this is, I'm obviously no astrologer, but I think of like advancements in technology and from a humanitarian standpoint, where everything is for the collective of humanity versus the individual or a few at the top. It
Okay,
kind of spreads for
perfect.
everybody. So it's just all about everyone. That's from
Perfect.
my perspective. And so I was just going to ask you to clarify that.
Right. No, that's exactly it. That's exactly
Okay.
it. So then the question is where people, people fall for the utopian thing. They have this idea. As soon as we hit there's a line and then the age of Aquarius starts, that's it. We're there. It doesn't work like that. What happens is, in fact, this happens with astrology cycles all the time.
Mm-hmm.
You're in the cycle and it's a work in progress. You got to go through it. And I've
Mm-hmm.
seen this with people where, okay, I got it. No, no, you don't. Hold on. Then by the next day, they got a different idea. You got to get through it, right? My feeling is the age of Aquarius, which I tie very strongly to the planet Uranus, began in the late 18th century when the Industrial Revolution was launched, the discovery of electricity, and then you get all these, new things coming online. Notice that it was then and only then that democracy started to become more popular on a wide scale, even though I know there are still lots of countries and places where they're not. But because people will say, oh, the Greeks were doing democracy. Yeah, but it's a small number. Now you have hundreds of millions of people doing this, which is, again, Aquarius energy, the energy of the people, the energy of a single person having as much power as all the people together. And I know it's messy because then, the egos rise and then you get conflicts. So basically, we're in it. It's a work in progress. It's happening before your very eyes. You're in the age of Aquarius. Now it's up to us, the people, to make it more and more real. Unfortunately, right now, as we all know, we're hitting a bump. It's true. There's a major bump in progress, but that's what happens. You sort through these things and you get to the other side. And I fully believe we will. It's just that, like all things, it takes time and you have to navigate through, right? That's the logic of that.
So, and the reason why I asked is because I'm an Aquarian, and I was just wondering, I don't think so, but you will clarify for me. When we have cycles like this that are tied to a specific zodiac, does that zodiac or that sun sign have a more specific role or purpose, or does it still matter more on their personal um, chart versus within the collective chart?
Yeah, I wouldn't put because in other words, if you start projecting the age of
Yeah.
Aquarius benefits or does something for or against Aquarius, that's not so much. What's more important is that if you're an Aquarius, you using basic high school math, not even, I mean grade 7 math for God's sake, like what's the degree of your sun, what's going on in your chart. Say for instance, take the degree of your sun. So as a broad thing, whatever the degree is between 20 2021 and 2023, like roughly, it even included the pandemic, but because that's the Saturn energy was in Aquarius in there. So then 21, 22 to the spring of 23, Saturn is in Aquarius. That period for Aquarians is what I said earlier. The chickens of ambition come home to roost. Saturn puts more pressure and it says to you, okay, what are you going to do with your life? Where are you going from here? What can you work on that will last a long time, that will both ground you, protect you, bring in safety, bring in, security, all of that. That's one example of a cycle affecting Aquarians now, totally grounded. And the second thing would be if you're really early Aquarius, like you're born January 22nd or something, or 23rd, 24th, then you got the Pluto cycle around your planet. Now it's another order of magnitude where some big change is happening. Something is happening to you relative to before, where you are experiencing massive change and growth within yourself that can propel you in a big way forward. Case in point, for example, and it's always related to what you've been doing. It's not going to happen like you can't say I have the impulse to be a doctor. Then you have to go to school to learn how to do medicine. You don't get the degree, right? Or if you are an artist, Pluto goes over your sun. That's not. I mean, the most it'll do is maybe really focus you on. Okay, yes, I am an artist, and I'm going to make this happen. Great. But Bruce Springsteen, back in the day, he had already had been singing. He was out there. He was already doing it, and then Pluto went over his sun, and it just propelled him to a much bigger place in his sphere, from
Yeah.
which he since then has been a much bigger figure, right? So a lot of this is when you're doing grounded practical astrology. Where are you right now? What have you done up to this point? And where do you go from here? And I generally discourage the thinking, well, maybe I'll win a lottery and that'll save me. Don't do that. That's not a good plan. The odds are too low. Focus, which by the way is what Saturn is. This is what it was doing to you in that period, whether through the front door or the back door, something was saying to you, you got to focus. You got to, otherwise this isn't going to happen, right?
So it sounds like it's just an opportunity to focus for potential opportunities, or focus on potential opportunities that could
Yeah,
be.
yeah. Although think about it though, at the same time, so you say, okay, I need to focus on something I'm going to do in the world in order to enhance my material, practical security. But then I hear that it's a good idea to be with myself a few minutes a day. Well, there you're focusing too.
Yeah,
You're doing the
yeah,
same
yeah,
thing.
that's true.
So you're creating this amazing thing that is guiding you spiritually and guiding you materially at the same time, which means
Love
you're going to
that.
be a lot more protected because you're less likely to make egotistical decisions that then,
Yes,
then later you realize, that was just me, preening, and don't,
yeah,
bring in the spirit so that you make good choices, and you're connecting to your happy place the whole time as well, right?
yeah.
You're killing multiple birds with one stone. I don't know. That's a bit of a tortured analogy, but yeah, that's
No, but I love that. So it's like, and that's a good lesson in life in general. It's just no matter what you are doing, stay grounded in yourself. No matter what is going on within yourself, or when your immediacy of life, or the whole world as a collective, stay grounded with yourself and you will always be okay. I'm saying okay is not in the sense that everything is perfect, but you will be okay and have that sense of knowing you'll be able to make it through.
hmm yeah,
So you mentioned earlier about archetypes. So it sounds, each planet carries an archetype or some type of symbolic
yes,
wisdom. How can
yes.
tuning into these archetypes help us connect more deeply with our own soul and inner truth?
Yeah, so that's another angle on the question. So the planets are archetypal forces. Saturn is the contracting force. It's why people don't generally like it. It's the universe converging. That's why it rules your bones. That's the ultimate coalescing. You get a structure and you get something extremely useful. Anything in life that crystallizes, which is a contraction, is Saturnian. But then you realize focus is also a contraction. That's the high end of the planet, right? Jupiter is expansion. It's the opposite, going the other way. And there's where you learn these archetypes have many, many ways of expressing from high end to low end. So obviously, contracting on the downside is going to correlate with paralysis, depression, less than you feel like you're this. That's not good. Or being tight. Being tight is, but if you realize, the best way is just to focus. And then what's the focus? Jupiter, which is expansion, which is opening, relaxing, letting go, being at ease, which is what you're trying to accomplish anyway. That's the whole idea. And you're on the lookout for the fact that Jupiter on the downside, because it's an expansive force, connects to indulgence and, eating too much food, spending too much money. You're going for the short-term gratification, which will feel good, but then you start to downtrend more and more because instead of helping you in the longer term, which is the more Saturnian thing, it starts to work against you. That's an example of archetypes in action right on the spot. Then, you can even go to the solar archetype, because it's great to say I'm a whatever sign. The thing is, you have a sun. Sun energy is your being energy. It's who you are. Like it rules your heart, literally, the center of the body, and also the solar plexus. This, by the way, you see a lot in language. It reflects these things. Like, why would they call this part of the body the solar plexus? Because it's very solar. It's where your personal power and your personal will lives. And in the heart center, your compassion and your connection to the world. So that circle is the sun. Now, the thing is, how do you activate the sun? Well, one of the ways is through, as we said earlier, which involves this thing you're doing with Saturn, Jupiter, to just feel your sense of being. But another way that's pretty obvious is that the sun, and you'll see this, go online and type, what is the astrological meaning of the sun? And it'll say, it rules your personal will. So really, astrology is the combination or the totality of the cycles together with your will. What are you doing to align with the cycles? So in short, deploying your will is very helpful. It really is. Like, just do things, start things, do things that maybe, yeah, you have to, it's not as easy as flopping in front of the TV. Yeah, of course. Will has that quality to it, but that's solar. Every time you're deploying some will, you're igniting the sun energy. That's an archetype. I mean, it's a huge archetype that is extremely helpful, to your nature, to your life, to everything.
I love
Yes.
that. I love the sun too. I call myself a sun seeker because I go out and try to find it and just stand in it for a minute or two. I use
Oh,
sunscreen.
and I tell you, so, really quickly, I just heard this yesterday. It's very interesting because I heard a short podcast on The Economist. They tend to be really grounded, and speaking of grounding, they tend to be usually more conservative too. So they're not going to say something unless they think, they're not going to tell you that Tylenol is bad, for example. Like, stop taking Tylenol. No, they wait for the studies, and apparently, the latest studies are showing that being in the sun, not to the point of scorching yourself, but being in the sun regularly is extremely important. And to some extent, taking vitamin D, to supplement and that is good. But the sun itself, he said, it literally extends your life and extends your well-being to make sure you get, solar exposure on a regular basis. So that's another practical thing, because I mean, it just means
Yeah,
going outside and being in the light. Yeah. So.
I love that too. Like I say, I will go out there and just stand for a few minutes and just feel
Mhm.
my body warm, and then I can go and finish my day or whatever. But I love that. So at Tour, my company, we speak about whole life wealth. This is the
Mhm.
alignment of emotional wealth, physical wealth, spiritual wealth, relational wealth, all the pillars of well being. How do you see astrology supporting holistic well being in this way?
Um, I I would say it's a little bit indirect. It's back to the thing where you know the cycles you're in from the astrology, and you've figured out that in addition to this knowledge, the knowledge itself points you to being with yourself,
Mm,
and being with yourself automatically increases your holistic sense of yourself, your sense of being one and at one with everything. And so, in other words, it's like you're finding your peaceful self, which is what some people call the surrendered self, although that's it's a word that to some people implies something bad. And so it's because you know the cycles, you know that they're inevitable, that they're there, that they're happening in a certain way. You accept it fully, you're with yourself, and then you feel you feel the holistic nature of it, which when you think of that in practical terms, that's like having really good health and well-being. The word health etymologically means to be whole. It
mm,
just means you're one.
yeah,
When you have disease, you feel ill at ease, right? And when you
yeah,
feel ill at ease, then you're not whole. So there are all these pointers in systems like astrology with all the cycles, and even in our language, pointing us in the right way if we bother to listen, so to speak, right? So that's the logic of this. Although this probably points even more to the importance of the daily practice of mind and body. And if you're going to have to choose, do that. But it's not a bad idea to know what you're in, because, like, for example, if you happen to be on more challenging cycles, when you're with yourself, you'll be feeling, it's a bigger struggle to let go, because you'll be thinking, no, I got to get up and do something. I got to, if I don't do something immediately, the world is going to fall apart. It's not, but that's what's happening then. Yeah.
love it. So, for someone listening who feels overwhelmed by astrology but would like to explore further, what are three practical steps they can take to begin applying astrological wisdom in their everyday life?
Uh, well, maybe I mean, I hate to make it into a self into promoting myself, but it is, or anyone, I mean, you can see any astrologer, talk to an astrologer. Not a bad idea to get a sense of where you are. That's probably going to be good. In terms of not that, then I would say first step would be take an interest in your own astrology, go online, you can do this and find your planet positions, write them down, put down what they are, and just wait to see what that does. Because you know what happens? You start something and then life starts to, maybe you see a website where it says something, or you hear a person, you've launched the pattern, and the odds improve that something else will interest you. That's what I did when I got started. Is I was doing one thing at a time, whatever was drawing my attention, and seeing, oh wow, that's pretty interesting. Look at that thing. That was how, then it would be like, for instance, when you get started, if you're really serious, whereas so far I've talked about these big planetary bodies that have these big orbits that do things at certain times. When I got into it and I wanted to learn more, I was tracking the moon, because the moon is moving around really quickly. In a month, it does the full circle. So you track it, but then you got to figure out how it works, because you track it by knowing how it's hitting your planets, right? But here's where it's very interesting, because right now you can get this information. If you have enough initiative, you can find it online, where you'll get a listing that says, there it is. So then, the moon is doing this, hour by hour even, because the moon will do usually at least 3, sometimes as much as 6 things in a day that it's touching, right? And this I've seen, by the way, in my own life so many times across 45 years, where I know my moon cycle, and I know pretty well when the energy is not as good, and when the energy changes to better energy. Happens every time, even when it's subtle, because sometimes it's pretty good, but I'm kind of going, it's good, but it's not great. I know that tomorrow it's going to get a little better or whatever. And the whole point is you're learning and learning as you go along, and it's how everything works. The more you expose yourself to a system, to anything, it just starts to come together. That's where what people call intuition, which, by the way, is what is found when you're sitting still. You're bringing the right brain into it and quieting the left brain. That it starts to speak without speaking. It just guides you. It sort of shows you, there it is. That's the wisdom. It's how it works. You then put words to it, which in a way confuses everything, because words are automatically, they're binary. So everything is this, that, high, low, and the unification point is silent. You can't speak it. That's why great spiritual teachers say, if you open your mouth, you've already said too much. Stop. So that's the logic of that. Yeah.
Yeah. So astrology often gets dismissed as either too mystical or too simplistic. What are some of the biggest misconceptions that you'd like to clear up, especially for those curious but skeptical?
Well, that what you said isn't true. That I mean, if it's too mystical, if you study it enough, ponder it enough, and not too long either, by the way, it doesn't take long to realize what's mystical about this. It's just telling you where you're at. And yeah, I mean, it's something that, like, you could say all kinds of other things where a person will say something about something they don't know about, and they'll just pass judgment. But in reality, no, it's a language. It's just that it's a pretty amazing, powerful language, because it's the language of life, literally the language of what we're experiencing. And you start to see all these echoes around, these archetypes that I was mentioning earlier, how they affect, entire movements in life or situations that are taking place in the world. You can see the Jupiter, you can see the Saturn. Or for example, remember earlier we said Uranus is discovered. This is one of the things where you realize when humanity discovered Uranus, the consciousness of humanity now aligns with that planet. Then you get the Industrial Revolution, technology starts to grow, freedom and independence start to grow, democracies gain more ground. And so it's manifesting in the world right before your very eyes. And so, I know that I see people that are otherwise really intelligent, like, for instance, Neil deGrasse Tyson. He's a great astronomer, but I've heard him say some really ignorant things about astrology. I would just say to him, look, until you look at this, you have a really big brain, man. Like, I know, because I've seen your videos. Until you spend a year looking at this, I want you to spend a year looking at this and then give me your feedback. Just tell me
Yeah.
what you think it is. Before that, stop talking because you don't know what you're talking about. You're talking from the outside, and especially for someone like that who could count and pretty easily. I mean, a person like that, they would notice right away. Now they might say, "Well, I still don't like how this thing, whatever,"
Yeah.
but you have to be thick as two planks. I'm not kidding, like two wooden planks to not see the obvious when you're tracking because it's there all the time. It's
Yeah.
clear as could be, you know.
So, looking at the sky right now, what are some of the most significant themes or energies you feel are shaping the months ahead, both collectively and
Okay, well, yeah, this I've talked about on my channel quite extensively. We're
okay?
in this period where the there's a Saturn Neptune conjunction that is kind of in play. It started already in the summer, but it's now backtracking a bit. By next year, Saturn Neptune in Aries, so we're in a zone that reflects why the US is in such dire straits because this is the exact same pattern back in the 1860s. Saturn in that case was on the other end of the Neptune, but it's a Saturn Neptune thing. Plus Uranus, speaking of Uranus, Uranus is discovered in 1783, I believe. That was a turbulent time for the world. There was a lot of realignment going on. The next 80 years later is during the Civil War, which separately, people may not know, was a very militaristic time as well throughout the world. It wasn't just the US, it was quite turbulent. Next Uranus is the Second World War. We're on I guess, the fourth, or no, the third. So Uranus is returning, basically, around this time. So we're in a turbulent time right now because these planets, it's almost like they're bringing in a new dimension, a new era,
Yeah.
and it's uncomfortable, just as it would have been for people living in those other eras. They were probably more upset than we are right now. Now to us, they're, oh yeah, those people in history, we think, oh yeah, look at those 10 years. When you say 10 years, it's very different to say it or to study it and to be in it.
Yeah.
So when you're in it, you feel it, right? And so
Hmm.
that's what we're in the big picture. And so, for instance, Aquarius, sign of the people, Uranus returning to where it started in Gemini. These are air signs. That's why AI, there's a big push forward, in the technology, right? And this is going to change our world, much like the phone did at one point when it was a new thing, the radio. People thought the world was ending, oh my God, the radio, that has to be bad. Or how can you be, now people are going to phone people? Oh, come on. Now we laugh because we think that's just what they thought was going on. It's the same thing with this. AI has the potential to be very helpful and or not be very problematic, as people have already said, right? As an example, which is the idea that technology is really moving more quickly. It's experiencing a quantum leap. So all of that is happening in the 2020s, and there's more. I mean, in astrology you see really amazing patterns. Like one of them, which I am still studying, but it's pretty remarkable. So there's this thing where these planets do this other thing separate from everything I've talked about so far, because it's all based on signs. What sign they're in and what they're doing. They do this thing where they go really far north or far south of the sun's solstice points, right? Which makes them, it's said to be they're out of bounds. And when they're out of bounds, they become more dominant because they're out there jutting out. So Pluto has been doing this thing out of bounds behavior for I think it's thousands of years. I need to verify that, but it's been since forever. Right now, of course, it's out of bounds like it was during the Second World War, and Pluto out of bounds foments this kind of fascistic, top-down emperor behavior, which we're seeing, especially here in this country. I mean, it's almost comedic when you listen to the things that are being said. You have to laugh because otherwise you cry. But here's the thing, right? Pluto is out of bounds into the next decade. And the first thing I'll tell you is do not assume that this lasts into the next decade, because I don't think it does, because it didn't in the Second World War. Even when it was out of bounds, in the middle of it already it was resolved, which I think is what's going to happen again here. But Pluto will never again be out of bounds for thousands of years after this, ever. And you know what's interesting too? The planet that checked Pluto in the Second World War was the other out of bounds planet, Uranus, which is the one that doesn't like fascistic behavior. And it's there again, same thing. We're in the same, very same struggle. And even, I mean, the other thing that I can tell you is, I mean, Pluto is very tiny. It's like the size of the moon. And astrology that way can be infuriating because you have these little bodies. You know, like people talk about Chiron. Chiron is this little rock between Saturn and Uranus that's hardly doing anything, and yet it shows up in charts, right? But there is something to be said about size. The biggest is the sun, by far, the sun energy, right? Then Jupiter, Saturn, huge. And the next one is Uranus and then Neptune. Like, so the solar system is basically Sun, Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune. After that, very, very tiny. So point is, Uranus is a big, big force. And in astrology terms, it's going to save us, in my opinion. That's the planet that guides it into the next realm where it's for the people and against the idea of a singular, usually, I'm sorry, complete idiot, you know, trying to. Because, I mean, by the way, these people generally are. Look at the big heads in history, Napoleon, Hitler. They overreach. They open multiple fronts. They talk nonsense, and they always come crashing and burning. And it's always through the power of people who get together and push back, you know? It's like that. So,
Right. Power of the people. I love it.
yeah.
So, if you could leave listeners with one piece of soul wisdom from astrology, something to hold close as they move through life, what would it be?
I would say, look, if you want to check your chart, great. If you want to get into it further, fantastic, great. But first things first. Be with yourself a minimum of a few minutes a day and realize that when you're doing that, you're being with your sun energy. You're being with sun energy is beyond being Taurus, Gemini. Of course, if you're a Taurus, you'll do Taurus things with your sun. If you're a Gemini, you'll do, yes, that's true. That's when you get up off the floor, off your couch or whatever you're sitting or lying down on, you get up and you do the flavor of the tribe that you're in astrologically. But the sun is pure energy. Just be with yourself regularly. This depends on over and over and over. You have to imprint it. You have to get you could say your subconscious literally to tune in that way. You know, it's curious that Carl Jung, the great psychologist, the way he put it was, whatever you have not made conscious from your subconscious will show up in your life as your fate. And this can be a real problem because your fears will show up,
Yeah.
your conflicts. How do you undo those things? When you're with yourself, I remember in my own case, my fear disappearing because I was noticing it. It was just being there and I would, you know, I'm being with myself and I could feel the energy of that. Oh yeah, that's scary. And then you just notice it as an impulse. As the days are passing, you start to notice, no pun intended, no, you can just let it go. And then once you do that, it disappears and doesn't show up anymore, right? So that's the most important thing. The period that you spend with yourself, that's what the astrology, I could almost say, really for me, it verified that more than it guided me to it. But now they're working together in a really beautiful way because I see them both intertwined. So I guess the answer to your question is more that what people would call meditation, being with yourself, is the key piece of wisdom that I have for people, you know, top of the list.
Love that. Love that so much. Well, thank you so much, Andre, for spending time with me, for answering my questions and bearing with my
Oh,
lack of
no.
technical ability.
I've had those technical things happen to me too, so I can totally empathize with what was happening there. And it can be like sometimes it's more complicated, and other times it'll be like a single switch or something you forgot, whatever. But
Yeah.
that's how it goes. No problem. Thank you for having me,
Thank
and
you so much.
let's do another talk sometime soon.
Sure, I would love that. Thank you. Bye.
Yeah, we'll say goodbye to everyone. Bye, everyone.
Bye, Andre. Thank you all for listening.